Well, folks, we got some breaking news here for you with regards to Nintendo Switch 2 today. We have some massive insight into the development of Donkey Kong Bananza. We finally have almost all the details we could ever want about the game. So we're going to deep dive into a massive interview that happened over at IGN. That's going to take up a huge chunk of the video today. We also have a additional story about how it's very likely Donkey Kong Bananza is about to leak to, I don't want to say to the internet, but at least leak in that there could be videos, screenshots, maybe even live streams of Donkey Kong Bananza hitting the internet fairly soon. We have one particular reason to believe that could be happening. More than that, we have a story about Nintendo really bricking's the wrong word, blocking another system over someone buying used games. However, it has a very happy ending and actually should serve as a relief to people that are worried about MIG switches and people dumping Switch 1 games and how it could affect your Switch 2, because it looks like Nintendo does know this could be a problem and they are actually doing the right thing and helping people out in this situation. So I do think that is really good news, to be honest. We have a story coming from GameStop and the mysterious stapler charity event. It's kind of weird and more. Look, I'm just really excited about today's big headlines and really excited because we get to talk about Donkey Kong Bananza today in depth, which is really cool because not only have we not really done that in a while, we're also giving away 5 copies of Donkey Kong Bananza. That's right. We are giving away 5 copies right now. You can go down to the link down in the pinned comment or the description. Winners will be drawn on the 15th. There's been a few questions about the giveaway. In general, if you win and you're in the United States, you will have an option to receive a physical copy. If you win outside of the United States, digital is the only version I am offering. This is just for logistic reasons, but yes, you still get a copy either way. Obviously, if you win the US, you can choose digital as well. Digital is more convenient for me, by the way, but I am willing to have direct from retailer shipped to your house sort of thing in the United States. Maybe even Canada, perhaps. It kind of just depends on how I can get the logistics to work on that, because now there's some trade things going on that make it a little funky. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive into this big interview by IGN of the Donkey Kong Bananza developers. So we're not going to read this whole thing, but we're going to go over some key points in here. You know, they talk about the conception of Donkey Kong Bananza. It says, you know, what idea or mechanic or theme was at the core of this game's development. We obviously know it was the voxel-based destruction that they do talk about as being present in Mario Odyssey. But, you know, it says it right here, was the original impetus for the development of Donkey Kong Bananza was when my boss, Mr. Koizumi, approached our team and asked us to consider working on a 3D Donkey Kong game. So this happened because Koizumi wanted it to happen. And I think that's very important to note when talking about this, is wanting Mr. Koizumi, him actually just wanting this game to exist. So I think that's important. They also talked to Miyamoto, the original creator of the character, and Miyamoto has experience not only working on Donkey Kong games that he's directly responsible for, but also worked alongside Rare on their games as well, Donkey Kong Country. And they talked about things about what makes DK, makes him different from Mario and other characters. And they talked about things like engaging in things like a hand slap or blowing his breath and stuff like that. And he talked to Koizumi, who served as a director on Jungle Beat as well, and talked about distinguishing characteristics as well, about having longer, stronger arms and stuff like that. So they took all that into consideration. They also talked about how the voxel-based destruction was actually in Mario Odyssey. They used it in the Luncheon Kingdom, or when you could plow through snow in the Snow Kingdom. So it was in use on a much smaller scale back on Switch 1. But that's really interesting to see that that's how this game really came into be. Now it talks about how, you know, is this the first time a Donkey Kong game has been made in-house at Nintendo in like 20 years? I was wondering if you knew why the decision was made to make it in-house. And Moto Kuro says, so because Nintendo does have a lot of characters to choose from, we're always considering what would be a good timing to create a new game with a certain character for most pleased customers. But of course, that's just my best guess. You'd have to ask Koizumi for the real answer. Because again, Koizumi's the one that wanted to do this. So if you wonder why you see Koizumi at some of these events, he's probably the executive producer. He's not the actual producer of the game. The producer for Donkey Kong Bananza, as it turns out, is actually the director for Mario Odyssey. And then they brought in a brand new director from Square Enix in 2020 to be the director of Donkey Kong Bananza. So this is all just really fascinating. But yeah, Koizumi, while we don't know his official role yet, we know that this game exists because he wanted it to. So he's probably the executive producer right above the former director of Mario Odyssey. Anyways, we get into this. It says, you know, what sorts of things inspired you while we were working on Donkey Kong Bananza? I've seen lots of people remarking that someone on the team maybe liked Wreck-It Ralph a lot. And he says, no, I wouldn't say that we drew inspiration from any one particular source like you're describing. So basically defeating the whole, hey, you might think this is Wreck-It Ralph related. No, actually, we didn't even consider that. But rather, because Donkey Kong has such a long history, we had a lot of different Donkey Kong titles to look at and consider places that we could receive inspiration. So when you mentioned in the particular of the comments on social media about Wreck-It Ralph, was it's some similarity of Pauline to one of the characters in that movie. Yes, Pauline is riding on the back of Donkey Kong, who's big and strong, and Pauline's kind of a small, younger character. In Wreck-It Ralph, you have Vanellope riding on the back of this big, strong fellow who can smash through things. And Motokoru says, yes, as it turns out from a very early stage in development of Donkey Kong Bananza, the team was discussing what kind of character would be best to accompany Donkey Kong on his travels. And at an early stage, I do recall that someone had suggested Pauline might be a good choice, but Pauline was not implemented directly into the game spec at that time. I think that the moment we actually realized we would go in that direction came about as a result of an artist who created some concept art of the zebra transformation. We saw that image and we thought it was really fun, so we immediately prototyped it to try it out in game. And when our composer saw that, they decided to create a specific music for that transformation. And that music for it was so good, we thought we could expand on this and turn it into a song. And maybe Pauline would be a good choice to sing that song. And so when asked the composer to create songs for each of the transformations, and I think that's what really cemented Pauline's place. I think a lot of ideas really fell into place after we had decided on Pauline as the accompanying character, and so I'll let Mr. Takahashi describe those. And what's really important to note about this aspect of the interview is they're basically saying, look, we understand that people are drawing this correlation to Wreck-It Ralph with Vanellope and Ralph, but that's not actually how this came about. Actually, our composer came up with something musically that made us think, man, this would be really cool if this was like a full song, with voice and stuff like that. And naturally, they thought of Pauline. So it's kind of interesting where they're kind of like, actually, it's just kind of a coincidence is what they're saying. Takahashi comes on and says, I think one of the things that really works well for us in choosing Pauline is that she's human. So she speaks in a language that the player will understand. And our setting is a strange underground world where you're interacting with animals and even rocks that speak in some cases. So it's a lot to take in. I think it's really good for the player to have another human that they can see on screen who is reacting to these strange things, noticing stuff, pointing them out, and giving hints. And in a game where you take destruction as its core gameplay, there's a lot of objects that are hidden waiting to be discovered. So it's really helpful to have some information coming to the player as audio cues so it's not getting in the way of visual information on the screen. And we also want to emphasize the power of Pauline's song in this game. And so she has the ability to make music that shows the route the player could follow or even opens up new routes to go see. And we have a co-op play that allows a second player to control Pauline's vocal blast that can interact with both the terrain and with enemies. Sorry, that was a rather long answer. I really do think a lot of the ideas came out of this choice of Pauline as the accompanying character. So looking back, I think it was a choice we're all very happy with. And it says, I think a lot of people were surprised when you confirmed a specific age for Pauline, that she was 13. This is a question a lot of people have had, like, why? Why did you specify her age, and why is she so young in the game? Takahashi says, well, one of the important roles is that we knew we wanted this character to accomplish was in accompanying Donkey Kong on his travels and acting in some cases as a bit of a narrator. And considering that we would probably have both new players who are experiencing Donkey Kong game for the first time, as well as people who are longtime fans of DK, we had the opportunity to offer a character that was familiar to longtime players, but had a new appearance that might be interesting for new folks as well. Then Motokoru comes in and says, and we're also thinking about the setting and not just the world, but also each character itself and how that's going to impact player enjoyment in the end. Takahashi then says, now, as to why 13-year-old in particular was the choice, I think that's something we want players to, in the course of enjoying the game, start to puzzle out and think for themselves. And you're going to see this brought up a couple times where, hey, why we specifically chose this particular thing, we want you guys to theorize or maybe even just discover it in the game. To tell you specifically why she's 13 might be a massive spoiler in the game. They don't want to give that away. So it does seem like there could be some deep Pauline DK lore going on here in the game, maybe even some Mario lore. I really like the idea that they thought about this and thought about the age, and there's obviously a reason for it that will become obvious as we play the game. Now, it talks about, can you confirm Donkey Kong's age? And I think that's another one that may be good fodder for player theory. So again, they're not going to explain why they decided that age for DK, but as you play the game, maybe you'll come up with your own theories. I think that's awesome. Now, they do dive a little bit into the story here, saying seeing a young Pauline and knowing that you all worked on Super Mario Odyssey. I started to think story-wise, maybe a Super Mario Odyssey prequel. And it says, certainly because of a lot of team members also worked on Mario Odyssey, there are some similarities in terms of how they think about the setting of the character for both games. But it's something we really can't explain all of for now because we need to leave something for people to consider as they're playing the game. And I wonder, because they talk about the canon timeline in that question. You wonder if, like, maybe people have caught on to it being a prequel, and maybe that's the explanation, and that's why Pauline is 13. It's kind of like they're not denying these theories out there, but they're kind of saying, hey, if we tell you what the reasons are, then, like, why, it's less discovery in the game. I like when they're kind of like, hey, we get what you're trying to ask. We're not going to give you that answer because just play the damn game, right? Also, when you were creating the game, at what point in development did you learn Donkey Kong is going to be receiving a visual redesign? And it's kind of interesting. So they said you want to make sure that you have a character that can be very expressive and emotive. And so from the very beginning of the project, we were considering over the long history of Donkey Kong, what elements we could pull into in terms of creating this appearance that would be fun for fans. As a result, we spent a lot of time thinking about distinctive visual features of DK as a character among the developers, even going all the way back to Mr. Miyamoto's original designs, which people pointed out, the original designs of Donkey Kong were actually quite silly. And that was Miyamoto's original vision. So they were actually looking back to that. And if you ever remember those original DK designs and the art on the old arcade games, you can understand that the way DK is designed now kind of calls back to the original design. Anyways, in games like Country Series, you see him adventuring in a jungle where he's a lot more cool and a wild side. So we wanted to pull together a lot of these different elements. So basically, it sounds like from the very beginning, they really wanted to redesign DK in some way. I think there's a perception that the new design Donkey Kong exists because of the movie. And it's true that sometimes there is a base for the model that will be used as the fundamental structure for different types of content. Sure. And then an author's note says, following an interview and prior to publication, Nintendo PR reached out to offer the following additional context. So Mr. Miyamoto's original design for Donkey Kong serves as the fundamental baseline that can be used for different types of content, including in Donkey Kong Bananza, but also the movie and Mario Kart World. The recent Donkey Kong as seen in Donkey Kong Bananza has roots in the original design created by Miyamoto with an element of Donkey Kong Bananza. So Nintendo really wanted to clarify here that, like, yeah, Motokura might be saying there could be some similarities, but Nintendo's official stance is actually all versions of DK are just kind of rooted in the original design. And honestly, this design of DK had nothing to do with the movie. They're trying to really separate that this is not movie DK. This is Bananza DK. And I think that's a really important clarification because people might try to draw correlations or put lore together. And in reality, they're kind of saying those are completely separate things. Like the DK and the Mario in the Mario movies is not the same as the Mario and DK in the actual games. And the design in the game had nothing to do with the movie. It had to do with the original designs and wanting to be more expressive and emotive. I think it's good clarification. Whether or not you buy these reasons, I don't know, but that's the official stances from Nintendo. They go on to ask, I know a lot of people identify very quickly that your team, the Super Mario Odyssey team, was behind DK Bananza because of certain elements, the menus and the open world design. What do you feel distinguishes Bananza the most from Odyssey? Motokura says, I think one of the biggest differences is that the case of Donkey Kong Bananza, the entire world is made up of voxel technology. And the reason for that is that we wanted to create an arena which would make the best use of Donkey Kong's physical strength as a character. Takahashi says, I think that this comes across in the level design where we had to consider the importance of the continuity of destruction. And on one level, similar to Super Mario Odyssey, each level has to be fun just if you're playing through it the normal way without doing a lot of destruction. But the makeup of this game also allows for the kind of destruction that keeps you connecting to new discoveries. So again, a lot of it's like, hey, this had to be fun to play through without destroying anything, but also we wanted it to be really fun with destroying it. And that's like a huge difference from Mario Odyssey. They talk about the Banandium gems and all the different stuff, probably the costumes, the gameplay cycle, lots of things they think are obviously different. And then it says, you mentioned the Banandium gems. Are the Banandium gems bananas or are they rocks? So Takahashi says, so yeah, what we're talking about is a material that only exists in the Donkey Kong Bananza universe, which we refer to as Banandium. And that material makes up a lot of what you're encountering, whether it's a Banandium gem or a Banandium chip, for example. So when Donkey Kong engages in a Bananza transformation, it uses banana energy. I know it may sound kind of silly to be explaining all this in such a serious voice because he's not. I'm probably more upbeat than his voice sounded in the interview as we're talking about Banandium, but that's a setting that we've created for the game, and that's what powers his transformations. But you'll also find that Banandium as a material has a deep connection to some story elements that I hope you enjoy. He says, I'm going to imagine Donkey Kong's eating banana-flavored rocks. Yeah, that sounds pretty good, actually. Obviously, it talks about how this game is best suited for release on Switch 2 as opposed to Switch. This is an important one because it's where we find out the game started out on Switch. So this game originally began its development cycle on Switch 1. And at the time, we were still using voxel technology and thinking of lots of different ideas for applications. When we learned about the Switch 2 development, we realized that the best implementation of these ideas would be on Switch 2. Takahashi then says, I was previously talking about the importance of continuity of destruction, and that was something we could expand on and have a longer continuous play experience with that kind of concept on Switch 2. Basically, the system's more powerful, so we can actually expand upon this and use it to a greater degree. It allowed us to engage in creating really extremely rich variety of materials and very large-scale changes in the environment. Now, it says you mentioned earlier drawing inspiration for all the different Donkey Kong games that have been in the past. In what ways is it important to honor Donkey Kong's history? And they go into some stuff here. I don't really want to dive too deep into the history stuff. You guys can read this interview for yourself if you want. And then at the end, it says, what am I not asking what you're really excited about? And he says, I wanted to mention the first consider making a Donkey Kong game. We really wanted to think about how we would pull in lots of new players. So that was one thing that they really focused here. Hey, we want to make this this will be a lot of people's first Donkey Kong game. How do we pull them in? And this one says, for those who have found Donkey Kong games in the past to be really difficult, we also wanted to mention the assist mode. They wanted to make sure that was emphasized, even though there can be some difficulty in the game. And they wanted to mention the co-op stuff. So there you go. You guys can go read the full interview if you want more. Credit to IGN for doing a pretty amazing job with this interview. And I know that took up a huge chunk here. I told you guys, it's going to be a long chunk of the video. That's why we have timestamps. And speaking of timestamps, hey, I'm a good person, DK Bananza. Yeah, this is obviously a link, an image from the back of a retail outlet that has all their physical copies of DK Bananza already in stock. One, looks fantastic. Two, when stuff like this pops up on the internet, generally it means things are probably going to leak pretty soon. And I don't mean leak in terms of emulation. I mean leak in terms of someone's going to steal one of these copies, take it home, record videos, put it on the internet. That's the kind of leaks we're talking about. So that's probably going to happen sometime soon, but right now it hasn't. But again, not going to leak in the traditional way that Switch 1 games were, where it's on the internet and now thousands are playing it, but leak in the way that someone's going to be stupid, take the copy, play, and put it online. And we'll probably see some stuff before launch. But we'll keep this in mind. We're paying attention to the leaks, so I don't make sure that I don't overlap with like somebody who has an illegal copy of the game versus, actual just general leaks. We kind of draw a line at actual, like, the game has leaked out there. Now, Nintendo updated some trademarks and stuff like that. I want to talk about this because I find it just to be interesting and something could come of it. So because something could come of it, we should cover it. It's over on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit. Nintendo has supposedly trademarked several titles, Metroid Prime 3 and Hunters, Hotel Dusk, Dragon Drive, Magical Star Sign in various countries. According to Nintendo Patents Watch on Blue Sky, on July 3rd, Nintendo filed several trademarks, including games mentioned in the title, Prime 3, Prime Hunters, Dragon Drive, Hotel Dusk, Room 215, and Magical Star Sign, and some random things like Nintendo Today, the app, and the question block, for whatever they wanted to use that for. Interesting part is that according to him, this trademark was for several countries, including Australia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, China, Colombia, EU, GB, South Korea, Mexico, Norway, NZ, Switzerland, USA. Some of these countries could be argued that it's a simple trademark renewal, like the US, Australia, and SK, but I doubt countries like Brazil, Chile, and Colombia already had trademarks for these games. So it couldn't be brand new trademarks. However, the account gives no source for the trademarks. And look, a Blue Sky account has actually corrected themselves, saying the trademarks for Nintendo Today was filed with all countries mentioned above. The games were only trademarked in Australia, Canada, China, EU, GB, South Korea, Mexico, Switzerland, and the USA, making it even more likely that it's only a trademark renewal. But again, we don't know. There could be some stuff that comes up here. One of the things is, like, I tried digging into some of these trademarks and they were there, but like it just takes a long time. And I understand that, being lazy is not an excuse, but trademark renewals don't necessarily mean anything in particular, but sometimes they do. So I just wanted to bring it up in case any of these games do come back or come out in some way. Now, this is a story where we got to dive into a user with a Switch 2 got their system banned by Nintendo for buying used games. They supposedly bought used games on Facebook Marketplace for Switch 1, inserted them into their Switch 2. The games needed an update. They updated and boop, the person got their system banned. This is an online ban. It was not a bricking. And this is because those games are apparently already dumped and duped and being used on a MIG Switch, or they're on the internet or somewhere else, right? Like these games have additional copies of them existing somewhere that Nintendo's aware of. Hence why they banned this person, because they just assumed this was somebody using one of those copies. Well, there's some good news about this, and this is where I think we should actually feel a little bit of relief, because I do think it's understandable that Nintendo is trying to block people that are using illegal copies of their games. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing for any company to do. But if you're a secondhand user that bought a used copy, this is a scare. People are worried about this, but at least in the United States, maybe you don't need to be worried. So this person over here, this D-Man They, says, be careful about buying used Switch 1 games. You can get banned if a bad actor dumped it. Having said that, Nintendo support is amazing. So I got banned and unbanned after simply downloading patches for 4 Switch 1 games I bought from Facebook Marketplace. If you get banned, you can go here, which is the support website for the US, and under Talk to a Human, select Start Chat. It was fast, painless, and you get a live person helping you. So much easier than getting support from Microsoft or Sony. And if you go through their comments, you'll notice all they had to do is provide just some images to prove that they actually bought these games, that they had the physical carts, and that they bought them from a Facebook Marketplace listing. Things that are very easy to provide. It's really easy to prove if you bought legit copies of games, even used. And yeah, they unbanned the system, no problem. So this is one of those things where, yeah, okay, it sucks that Nintendo banned, but also it's understandable why they did. And so really what we need to examine then is, okay, if we know why they did and it's understandable, is Nintendo going to do the right thing for the consumer that did nothing wrong? And the answer is yes. And it made it a really painless experience. So I'm happy about that. So I think this should really give relief. Go ahead and buy your used games. Even if it got dumped and your system does get in trouble, support will take care of you. And it seemed like it was pretty quick and painless. Like he probably got taken care of the same day. So that's awesome. Now, let's go ahead and get into a story that has people talking today about the greed and scum of Nintendo. They appear to be ending the voucher program, at least in Japan, probably going to be worldwide. Notice regarding the end of Switch 2-for-1 catalog tickets. These are the voucher tickets. This is translated from Japan, which is why it's not the exact language we would use. But it says, we are pleased to announce the sales of Switch 2 game save Nintendo catalog tickets, here referred to as Nintendo catalog ticket, or here Nintendo voucher program. Product exclusive to Nintendo Switch Online subscribers will end on 11:59 p.m. on January 30th. So the last day of January 30th, 2026 is the last day you can buy the vouchers. They will be valid to use for the 12 months after that date. So basically usable all the way to like January 29th, 2027. So Nintendo's ending the voucher program, at least in Japan, probably worldwide, and they're ending it at the end of January, although you can still use tickets all the way till the end of January of 2027. Now, the reason I bring this up is I understand people being upset about the voucher program going away. And I think the voucher program going away and not being available for Switch 2, I think is a very understandable criticism, because they at least could have launched a new voucher program. If games are all going to go up $10, then just raise the price of the voucher program $20. Everyone could still save $10. We could still get our games for $60, and people would be pretty happy about that. But they got rid of the program and never put it on Switch 2. And they said it was going to stay on Switch 1 for a bit, and now we know when it's ending. Now, here's one reason I'm going to say I'm not actually mad about it ending on Switch 1. I'm more upset about them not having any sort of program on Switch 2. And that is because it is my belief, and I don't know for sure, but I do not believe Nintendo is going to have any brand new first-party released games on Switch 1 after 2026. And this is really important because the voucher program only works on Nintendo published games. And because of that, the best use of this program is to buy brand new releases. So games that release at $60 or more by Nintendo on Switch 1. But after 2026, there won't be any more of those games coming, at least by my estimation. And if my estimation is correct, that means that the program's kind of useless after next year anyways. So by not letting people purchase it past January of 2026, this tells me a couple things. One, we'll know about all the games coming to Switch 1 next year by that date. That's what I presume from Nintendo. And two, they don't want to keep selling the vouchers throughout the year because they might actually be a ripoff to the consumer. Let's say you buy it in November and you decide I'm going to get a new Pokemon game with one. What are you going to do with the other one? Oh, I'll save it for the next big Nintendo game coming to Switch 1, but then there isn't. And then it turns out it's actually cheaper to just buy games on sale, whether physically or digitally, in 2027 on Switch 1 than it is to use the voucher program. So it actually could end up costing you more money because there wouldn't be new games coming. So obviously this is based on my theory that there won't be any new games past 2026, but also I think it's a fairly reasonable theory. That's around the time they stop doing things from Nintendo on 3DS. And that doesn't mean they're going to stop selling Switch 1s. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be third-party games that come out, but none of that stuff is has anything to do with the voucher program. The voucher program is Nintendo first party only. And we just got to be honest, There probably isn't anything after next year coming to Switch 2 from Nintendo, or Switch 1 from Nintendo. They're going to keep putting some things on Switch 2. This obviously means I wish that they would relaunch a new program like this on Switch 2, and maybe they will. And maybe they will at the end of 2026. That would be cool. But for right now, I'm not that mad about this ending. I think it just makes sense. That's the thing. Like, if there's nothing new past 2026, then really, you're kind of saving consumers money. Now, we do have this interesting story from GameStop. This is what we're ending with today because it's kind of a fun one. A weird one, but a fun one. And it started with this post here on... what is this? Twitter, where it said the infamous Switch 2 stapler is now available for auction. Proceeds benefit the Children's Miracle Network hospitals, which it's always good to see charity work, even if it's kind of hilarious. So you get the one black stapler, the box, the staple. This goes to that story about the stapler that was poking holes from one person who was stapling receipts to the Switch 2. And so, yeah, you can see one of the boxes that was returned with one of the staple marks. I'm sure there probably isn't a Switch 2 unit in the box. Maybe there is. I don't know. Maybe one of the broken units is literally in here. Then the stapler with that piece of paper that we just saw. What's kind of funny too is Ryan Cohen, who's the CEO of GameStop right now, says if this reaches 6 figures, I'll include my underwear. Now I'm assuming it's a clean pair of underwear. And I know this all seems kind of funny, but reality is it did hit 6 figures and it's still going. So at the time of recording, it's already at $111,469 on the top offer. Now, again, I know this seems absolutely ridiculous that anyone would buy this, but we have to remember that this is also for charity. And so it being for charity kind of makes it not really that scummy. If they were just auctioning this off for their own purposes because they think it's funny, that's one thing, but they are turning it into a charity story, and they did do right by every customer that was affected by this. So honestly, I don't think there's anything too bad about it. I think it's kind of crazy anyone's going to spend $111,469, but you can also argue that that's a donation to charity. So for people that have that kind of money rolling around and they do believe in the Children's Miracle Network and stuff, giving that kind of money could make sense. I mean, we've seen some pretty large donations to another YouTuber out there doing Ryan Trahan, who's doing like these 50 states in 50 days Airbnb thing. And he's raised like over $3 million for the St. Jude's Network, St. Jude's Hospital and stuff like that. And that's a cause I really believe in as well, dealing with cancer patients and children. So I do think that, some people just think these are worthy causes, and that's where a lot of this money comes from. But yeah, cool. Kind of a funny story, but a cool story. And look, I got no interest in buying a black stapler. I already got a stapler. All right, there's my stapler. Now all I gotta do is take my Switch 2, right? Staple it, and then one of you guys will buy this on eBay for like $100,000, right? For charity. Okay. I'm just playing around. I'm not gonna ruin my Switch 2, but yeah, I think it's kind of a neat thing. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I am Nintendo Robo Jets from Nintendo Prime, and I'll catch you in the next video.